Welcome to Larkin-Gowan Insights, accountancy and business advice for all, the series that gives you bite-sized tips and guidance on tax, funding, legislation, reforms and much more. With case studies, business advisory and sector specials and even interviews, our team of experts are committed to helping you navigate the world of accounting and finance with a variety of presenters from across our specialisms. So, let's get on with today's show.
Today's episode is around succession planning within your business, and we are joined by our colleague Martin Bugg. Hi Martin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Martin. I'm a partner in our business team within our Norwich office. Good to be here.
Thanks, Martin. So, Martin, you deal with a lot of businesses that are looking towards succession planning, aren't they? That kind of higher turnovers where maybe they're looking to build the next generation. What would you say a succession plan looks like?
Firstly, I think we should think about what succession actually is in a business. There's sort of two strands that a business could look for its succession and what they're trying to achieve, whether it's actually a business owner has an exit, or whether actually they're looking for someone just to take on that leadership, that ownership of the company, whether that's a group of employees or family members actually coming through and taking the business into the future. So when you're thinking about a succession plan and what a business needs to identify, I think the first thing is, firstly, what their main goal is, whether that's ownership or whether that's exit. And if it is ownership, and we're specifically talking about that in this episode, then actually the first thing they need to do is identify those people that are going to take the business into the future, identifying whether they're key employees or key family members that are going to be critical to the success of the business. I suppose it's those people that you can't do without, the ones that you would go, if they were leaving, handed in their notice, you go, wow, what are we going to do now? They are critical to the business. So you know who they are. Put that in your thinking of, right, I don't want them to go, right, well, therefore they are for the future of the business, and then highlight it, within the business.
I suppose people might already have that in the back of their minds, might they? If they go on holiday, for example, you already know who you're leaving the key actions to while you're away. So peace of mind, it's okay. Bob is going to be looking after that while I'm away. So it's just cementing that, is it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's that critical role. The people that are, as you say, doing those things in the background that may be a bit unsung at times, but the ones that you really rely on. I think that's part of identifying what your succession plan is. The second thing I think you really must do is highlight what your timelines are for all of this. Is it that you want to step away from the business tomorrow, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? It still needs to have a plan of where you're going, when you're going, because none of these things happen overnight. They all need thinking, planning, and actually sometimes for you to be open and honest with those employees that you've highlighted, that actually, this is your direction of travel.
Yeah, so we roughly say you might want your 10-year plan, but by 5 years, we really need to be bringing those people on and them seeing where they're going as well, don't you? What do you think what is a typical person that might take over your duties? What do you think they look like?
You have to ascertain the employees that have the skills that you need, the experience, and that intangible potential to fill the role, that whether that's what you're in or what the business leaders within the business effectively look like. They've got to tick all them boxes. They've got to have them critical skills that go, actually, we can learn a couple of the skills that you need to run this business, but actually if you don't have the drive, the passion and the potential to do it, actually they might not be the right successor for your business. They don't have that drive to take it into the future and continue along the same path that you've already set that course of business up to do.
You're almost looking, Martin, at who the business wouldn't be the same without, what key members of staff would make that change to the business.
That is effectively what we need with any succession plan is your key people. And I talked a bit earlier about that they might not necessarily have to have all the right skills, experience to fill the role that you might want them to have in the future. But that's where actually having that 10-year plan, not just for the business, but also actually linking it with the employees' development as well, or the key people, whether that's family members, that actually they're developing their own skill set for their future role. Whether that is you need to make sure that they have a good mentor within your business, whether they have required training of skills that they don't have, or whether actually that means that you bring them under your wing so they shadow you at some points in actually understanding how you make decisions, for example, or how you approach certain scenarios. All of that is really important as part of your plan as well, to make sure the people are as fit for purpose as you've highlighted them to be.
No, I've definitely experienced it with a few of our clients where perhaps they're bringing on the next generation if it's a family business, and they'll say, actually, I would like to bring my son or daughter to the year-end accounts meeting so they can see what the figures look like, what we discuss, future plans, and really bring them into it. So it's just giving them the opportunities, isn't it? Rather than going, right, this is my timeline, and by this date, I'm just going to hand the keys over to you and off you go. It's actually bringing them along that journey with you, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's key. And I think that there's bringing them along the journey, but actually part of that bringing along the journey is actually to be open and honest with them and have that conversation to go, actually, look, we see you as being critical for our business going forward. We believe in you. We have faith that you are going to develop the right acquired skill sets, lead this business into the future. And actually having that open and honest conversation is, is this actually what you want? Is this a direction of travel that you want to take your career? Do you want to be the person that leads our business into the future? Come along for the journey, because it's not necessarily right for everybody. Whilst it might feel right at the time and the people might perceive that they want it, actually when you actually scratch the surface a bit, it might not be in their radar, and they're quite happy to perform the role they are but don't actually want to perform any different role. One of the other things that you mentioned and you talked about there, Megan, was family members bringing the younger generation along. Well, family businesses all face unique challenges when it comes to succession, when there might be multiple children that might be looking to take over the business. Actually, who is nailed to the mast as being the succession for the business? Are they all going to step up in a role? Actually, does one of the family members, they came along for the ride, but it's not where they want to be, and actually they have their own challenges when it comes to actually integrating the new generation in, and almost stepping back of the older generation as well. That will be challenging to do, because whilst the new generation may have taken over, stepped in, the older generation will always be round the dinner table as such. So will always have their finger in the pie to effectively give their advice as guidance, which to a certain extent that can be really helpful. But also it can sometimes be against necessarily what the second generation might have decided.
I think something we see quite often with the family dynamic is the next generation coming through have got bright ideas on things such as digitalising the business, automating areas. Martin, you're obviously pretty hot on everything digital. What have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, do like my tech. Well, I suppose in my experience, the bringing fresh faces, new ideas, they do bring it to the table and actually are really proactive in making sure that things are not necessarily always done in the same way they always have been, that they challenge the norms and are not afraid to change things, and actually to put their own stamp on any business through any succession that we're talking about, that actually it might be important for them to do some of that. So whether they're using new technology, bringing in new software, whether they're using AI data analytics to look at various different metrics within the business, that's them bringing their own stamp on it, and actually is can take a business flourishing into the future.
So we've spoken quite a lot about family businesses and succession plans within that, but how do you keep that external stakeholder confidence?
I think it's key for any business to be seen as being continuing. So your external stakeholders looking in might know that the business owners, for example, are aging and or have got different priorities in life. So actually, for them to see that you've got a plan, you're bringing people in, you're bringing people along to the meetings, for example, as we've mentioned before, then actually they can see that you're addressing this, that you know, and you've got a plan. I think that's really important, because if they're going to continue trading with you, buying, at any level from you, whether that's services or products, they want to see that actually, this is all going in the right direction.
I think a lot of the time as well, they'll probably be familiar, so suppliers or customers. If it's in a family business, or even if it's not, to be honest, you'll always be familiar with the other names in the business. And if they are key persons to your business, there's quite a high chance that you know of them, and it's therefore quite a natural progression.
Yeah, and I think it's that natural progression that you've highlighted this person to step up and join in at around the table, around the management table, and actually that your key stakeholders are seeing that, and actually decisions are coming from them as well. It all goes to bed in that confidence that that there is a plan going forward.
It's more natural, isn't it? Because especially if you've got a 5-year plan, for example, you can start thinking about what steps do I need to put in now? Who do I need to introduce to start building that relationship ready?
Yeah, agreed completely.
So, with the change in businesses and looking at succession planning, how do you make sure that the culture remains positive? So, you've mentioned family businesses and some perhaps expectations that it will be the older sibling, for example. But if there's any disruptions, how have you seen businesses manage the culture?
I think going back to one of my previous points, the common challenge when you talk about culture is the resistance from current leaders or employees to accept the succession plan that you've highlighted. But that's where I've seen that being open and honest, communicating the benefits, involving the team, the wider team, all in the process of it, brings them into the understanding, and that's almost been critical, that they're on board, they're not out of the loop, they understand the goals and what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. It's change, and there's often a little bit of disruption with any change. But I think one of the main things to keep in mind is communication and being transparent.
Yeah, I did very, very much so. if being open and transparent with the employees about it is really important. One of the things we haven't yet touched on is sometimes actually how to motivate some of them people that, we see you as the succession of the business. They might be employees, they might not be the owners of the shares in the company or derive anything from the profits of the company. Actually, there are parts that you can look at that once succession plan is going and moving on, it's part of your plan to think, actually, look, how do we keep our key people on board, motivate them to be part of the business going forward. It's challenging when it comes to family. I've seen where it's gone right really well, and I've seen where it hasn't gone right really well. And I think, Alanah, you're 100% correct, is that the most appropriate person might not necessarily be the son or the daughter to take it forward. It may be the key managing director that's been the existing owner's right-hand person for the last 10, 15 years that actually is the most appropriate person in the interim to take it forward. Doesn't mean that the son and daughter might not get there, but actually you're giving them a bit more time, a bit more breathing space to develop that skill set to then take it on.
Yeah, making others comfortable as well. So communicating to the other employees to say, what is your progression plan, for example, to then give them the level of confidence that they can also progress and that there is room for them to progress.
So what happens if the plan changes? So you've got your key member of staff who you've been training up, but perhaps their priorities or life circumstances change. Is it super important to keep looking at this succession plan? How often, how regular do you think people should be looking at that plan and communicating that with their teams?
Plans change all the while. I like an analogy. Let's take it to a football analogy. You set your team out one way to go and play football against the other one, and then at half time, your opponents make plenty of substitutions, change their formation. You need to act on the fly for some of that and change and mold with what you now need to do to beat that other team. You can set your plan, but reviewing it regularly, making sure it still is the right plan is important. We talked about having a plan for 5 and 10 years, but actually you need to review it and refresh it.
I think a lot of people would think of an accountant and think that we just look at those financial figures. But actually, the way we work with a lot of our clients is through regular catch-ups, talking about the finances, but actually those bits as well, isn't it? How are the family getting on? How is getting on? Do you want to talk a bit more about that, Martin? How we can help people with their succession planning?
For a lot of our clients, we've been acting for them for many years. We know the business owners really well, and actually we can sit down and talk about where the business is going, how it's going to get there. Is there an exit strategy for a director, whether that is succession like we've talked about in this podcast, or whether actually that is a complete exit from the business and maybe a sale. We've got people within our teams that can talk to all of our clients and any prospective clients about any of that, and actually give them what we've seen before, what works well, what doesn't work so well, and actually help them.
Yeah, so the financial figures can help people make informed decisions, can't it, around that? And okay, who's performing the best, what things have worked well, and just using our knowledge from all different industries, different client types, we can maybe help with a few insights as well.
Yeah, we see a lot of different industries, and we see a lot of different scenarios that actually you see what works really well, you see what maybe hasn't worked so well. And that doesn't mean to say if it hasn't worked so well, that's not necessarily the right answer. But actually, we've seen here are the pitfalls, and we're highlighting the pitfalls to you, so you don't make the same mistakes. You don't go down that same route that might not have worked so well in the past.
Yeah. So questions such as, how do I retain my staff? that's probably something we can help with in terms of bonus structures, that type of area as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I talked previously about how you incentivize your key people to remain within the business, how you think about if it's family, for example, moving shareholdings down generations. They're all things that we can advise on, and actually, as you mentioned, bonus structures or different types of remuneration. Once you've hit a certain level of profit, then it's shared between your key people. Actually, we can look and talk to you about that to see actually is that the right option, or is there a transfer of shares? What's the timeline for it? When's it going to hit? Actually, if you do that, what are the tax implications of doing that? There's plenty of things that can be laid on the table and plenty of options, but always, as a put a bit of health warning, is you've always got to speak to your advisor about it to make sure it is right for you in the business at the time.
And you've mentioned timeline, Martin. How do you know when the right time to have those conversations with your accountant or other professionals?
Well, I think if you're listening to this podcast and thinking, I don't necessarily have a plan, but I know my plan starts with I want to exit the business in 3, 5, 10 years time, then actually now's the right time. There's no reason that you need to leave it or dwell on it. Actually, getting that plan in place, knowing where it is, it's a bit more of that comfort blanket to actually make you sleep sounder at night. That actually, look, we've got a plan in place, and now it might change and it might mold and things might happen and people might leave and people might come, and it changes and flexes it. But for the here and now, if something happened tomorrow, we know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. We've got a few clients that have mentioned that they're quite happy day to day running the business, but actually in say 5 years they're ready to retire, and it just gives us that knowledge of their plans and seeing inside their head what their thoughts are, so that we can then think about that when we're having the year-end meetings between now and then, to start thinking about how we deal with that transition and how we guide our clients through it.
I was meeting with a client a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about succession planning. And actually, must have been about 10 years ago, we put in a succession plan of how the key directors within the business were going to step back from the business. We're going to allow and let the management team, as it currently stood at the time, to come in and run the business. So actually, they could enjoy their time how they wanted to, and the business was still run. As a couple of weeks ago, the next part of that succession plan we've now put in place, family members are now going to get involved at that sort of higher level. Actually, shadowing each key part of the business is really important for them, and understanding how things are operating, understanding the finances, as well as understanding the sort of decision making and the customers, are really important for this business succession and for it to keep going. And effectively, almost draining that great information out of the existing business owners' heads and making sure it's in a settled team, settled people that are coming through to go, right, I can do it. And whilst they'll have their own ideas for how to take that business into the future, at least they've got the knowledge and the history of the past and how things have been decided in the past. That's all great knowledge and experience as well.
Absolutely. It's very rewarding as well, isn't it, when we see our clients and their employees working their way up and being promoted. It's quite nice to see, isn't it?
One of my other clients have recently gone through the second generation taking a step back, the third generation coming in, and actually, it's really refreshing to see the third generation wanting to step up, wanting to drive the business going forward, having really ambitious plans for the business. It's taking that drive function of the business into the future, and actually where I found it very rewarding for me as an accountant is actually to be there on that journey with them and actually helping them on the way. And whilst they not necessarily have I think they highlight, they might not necessarily have all the skills they need, but actually being that trusted advisor to them, that when they go, you might not know the answer either, but what's your thoughts on it as well, actually makes it really rewarding for me too.
Yeah, we have quite a lot of clients that will say, oh, when I retire, I want to go and do this and I want to do that. And ultimately what they want to do is just have a year out, sun it up on the Mediterranean. That is a little bit sweeter, that cocktail, when you know that you've left your business and it's all gone smoothly and you trust the people that are now running it.
Definitely, just like anything, it's that peace of mind that when you've left to go on that holiday, you've locked the house and you know the security alarm's on. It's exactly the same.
So in a previous episode, we've spoken quite a lot around growth and the use of digital products to look at forecasting. So Martin, how can we use the digital products for succession planning as well?
Digital tools give a great insight into the finances of the business. And, I've got my own podcast series where I talk about various different parts of technology and how businesses can embrace that technology. But I think one of the things it will do is give you that insight into that financial, that KPI part of the business. Anybody coming through at any succession measure won't necessarily have that oversight, that insight too. And actually, that will be able to give them that insight. If the business is not able to provide that insight to them, talking about what technology needs to be implemented into a business as part of that succession plan to make sure that any business and any future business owner can use AI, data analytics, and understand the key numbers within a business so great business decisions can be made is really important. And it's something that we talk to businesses about all the while.
Yeah, sit down with clients, look through their KPIs, have they met them, how are they going to meet them, and ultimately who are those people within that business that are going to help them meet them. And being, again, like you said, transparent, making sure those objectives and timelines are clear. We can really use the tools that we've got available to us to help those conversations.
I think that sums it up perfectly.
Yeah. So using not just your accountant, but there might be some other people within your network that you might need to use, such as maybe some IFAs or solicitors.
Yeah, I think with any succession plan, we as accountants can provide help with that plan, help with identifying those individuals. But there are other professionals. Any business should always check in with whether that's illegal from an employment contract or actually putting something down legally on paper in respect of a bonus scheme or in respect of actually, look, this is what's going to happen and this is what we're going to commit to, or whether there's other HR professionals that actually needs to be touched on as well.
Yeah, so we can probably help people with those recommendations, those referrals as well, can't we? If they don't have those in place, been through this with other clients, we can see what's worked for them, the right kind of person to work with as well, and make it a bit of a collaboration with your whole network.
We've definitely got all them contacts that a business would need, and we can make them as introductions where necessary.
Also, when you're looking at things like, I know we touched on earlier, employee retention, there's some services that people might not even know are out there, such as employee benefits, and looking at packages within that, which also help.
Yeah, very much so.
So Martin, just to wrap up now, because you've given us lots of different advice, and I am going to put you on the spot now. What would be your top 3 tips to anyone that is starting to think about how they're going to identify and start to make that move for their business?
Yeah, so I think firstly, the top tip is actually sitting down and understanding what your retirement plan is. How, when's it going to be? 5 years, 10 years time? Got to understand that first before you can put together any succession plan. 2 is identify the key individuals within the business, whether that is family, whether that's key employees, and actually have a plan for them to achieve the succession of the business. And my third tip is to make sure you talk to your advisors along the way. It's key to get that insight, that input, and that sort of objective reasoning as to actually what your plan looks like.
Thank you, Martin, for joining us today. We've obviously spoken about quite a lot. If anybody would like to get into contact, our details are within the show notes. And Martin, a link to your previous podcast series is also in the show notes, isn't it?
It is, yes, how you can supercharge your business, talking about all things digital tech.
Thank you, Martin, for joining us today.
Cheers, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for Larkin Gowan Insights, Accountancy and Business Advice for All. Don't forget, you can find more information about today's topic and more about how our team of experts can help you in your business by visiting our website, larkin-gowan.co.uk. Join us again next time for another fascinating insight into the world of accounting and finance.